All right, we're today, the message title today is Nibbling Ourselves Lost. And I'm going to have, I kind of looked very quickly through the sermon this week, and I've got about 20 questions I'm going to be asking you this morning. Really kind of bang, 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 bang. So a lot of questions today. Let's see if we have the answers. I guess that's what's important. But nibbling ourselves lost, and we're looking at Luke's Gospel, the 9th chapter. Going to be reading verses 28 to 36. 8 days later, he took Peter, James, and John with him into the hills to pray. And as he was praying, his face began to shine, and his clothes became dazzling white and blazed with light. Then 2 men appeared and began talking with him, Moses and Elijah. They were splendid in appearance, glorious to see, and they were speaking of his death at Jerusalem, to be carried out in accordance with God's plan. Peter and the others had been very drowsy and had fallen asleep. Now they woke up and saw Jesus, covered with brightness and glory, and the 2 men standing with him. As Moses and Elijah were starting to leave, Peter, all confused and not even knowing what he was saying, blurted out, "Master, this is wonderful. We'll put up 3 shelters. One for you, and one for Moses, and one for Elijah." But even as he was saying this, a bright cloud formed above them, and terror gripped them as it covered them. And a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, my chosen one. Listen to him." Then as the voice died away, Jesus was there alone with his disciples. They didn't tell anyone what they had seen until long afterwards. Blessing the reading of God's wonderful word to us today. Well, it didn't take long. They didn't have to wait very long, did they? As Jesus was praying, the appearance of his face changed, and his clothes flashed white like lightning. Then, of all things, Moses and Elijah suddenly appear on the scene. And Moses and Elijah hadn't been around for thousands of years. And they, of course, are 2 of the most famous people who ever lived. Peter, James, and John are literally getting a ringside seat on God's kingdom. Think about that. They are seen into another dimension, another reality. I've always felt they are suddenly in heaven itself. Think of that. We are told that Moses and Elijah are clothed with heavenly splendor. And they are talking to Jesus about his upcoming journey to the cross. This is such an amazing experience. I mean, can you even imagine? They are literally seeing God's kingdom before they die. I mean, what could be better? High up on the mountain with Jesus, Moses, and Elijah in the very presence of God. Well, how could they possibly return to the dark, lost, pain-filled life that they had left behind? I mean, Peter must have thought that this was it. This was it. He must have felt that this was the beginning of everlasting life in heaven. Never again would he have to face the terrors of life on earth. Never again would he have to deal with disease and pain and suffering and evil and anguish. I mean, why would anyone want to? You'd have to be crazy to go back. But then Peter sees Moses and Elijah. They're getting ready to leave, and he panics. He panics. Wait a minute. Wait a minute, he shouts just desperately. It's good to be here, isn't it? It's good that we're here. So we should kind of put together, construct 3 shrines here, shelters, places to stay forever. One for Jesus and one for Moses and one for Elijah. Hold on just a little longer. I'll do it quickly, I'll go to Lowe's and I'll get supplies. Home Depot, just hang in there with me. Don't go anywhere. Please don't go anywhere. But we are told that Peter, while he was still speaking, the cloud overshadowed them, and then a voice from the cloud said, "This is my son, my chosen one." And in the very important ending, listen to him. And then it was just them and Jesus on the mountain again. And it was time to start heading back down to earth. Now, do you really think it was easy for Peter and James and John to listen to Jesus and leave that mountain where they literally saw and felt and experienced heaven? Do you think it was easy for Jesus to head back down the mountain, knowing what he was going to face almost immediately, the reality of the pain of the world, but also he would be receiving the most excruciating death imaginable? Could Jesus have decided not to do it? Could Jesus have made the decision it wasn't worth it? Sure, probably. Would his love for humankind, allow him to make that most tempting decision? Would his goodness and mercy allow it? Would his holiness and sovereignty allow it? God, being God, had to come and suffer and die. If he hadn't done it, he wouldn't be God. For God is love. And God cannot sit back passively and watch as you and I suffer. Now, what do you make of all of this? What do you make of all of this? Does it cause you to look at things a bit differently? Does it give you hope? Despite the fact that you presently live in a perishable body that's aging or will age one day, and we become plagued with sickness and pain? Does this give you hope when you look around and you see people living with agony of loss and disappointment and poverty and hunger and fear and mourning? Does this give you faith that there is a God who is with you, who loves you, and that the difficulties you are presently facing will not be the last word? Does this cause you to love God back because of the great love God has for you? And in loving God back, do you find that you can start to love yourself and others in ways that you never, ever thought possible? And in loving God and others, do you find a peace that transcends all the difficulties of this life, and a joy which cannot be broken or taken away no matter what the devil, the hater of humankind, throws your way? If so, can you taste the victory which was won by you, by Jesus the Christ on Calvary? Wonderful things to think about. There is a strange fable which I've always liked. It always made me think It's a fable about where each floor of a high-rise office building represents a certain level of achievement. Workers in the basement have the lowest status. And as they climb up from floor to floor, they achieve a higher status until finally the top floor workers have reached the pinnacle of success. Well, one of the basement workers is a man by the name of Harvey. He has a very humble job in the stockroom. As a stockroom boy, his status was the lowest in the entire building. Well, one day, Harvey saw a bug crawling up a wall of the stockroom. Well, maybe he was the lowest person in that building, but at least he could say he was bigger than that bug. So he rolled up a newspaper and he was ready to flatten that bug. And then all of a sudden, the bug speaks. Now, this is a fable. Remember, the bug says, "Don't flatten me. Spare me, and I will grant your fondest wishes." So Harvey says, "Okay, I'll spare you, but you must grant my wish. I wish to be elevated to the first floor position." Poof, presto, his wish was granted. But after working on the first floor for a while, he wishes for a job on the second floor, and then the third floor. One after the other, his wishes are granted, and each promotion, of course, means more status, more money, and finally, Harvey wishes himself on the 96th floor, the top floor, the very pinnacle of success, or he thinks. Until one day he discovers a stairway going up. Is there a higher floor? I have to find out, he said. So Harvey scrambles up the stairs and he finds himself on the roof. Here at last, I have achieved the highest possible position. I've done it, Harvey says to himself. I'm number one. And then he notices a boy down on his knees at the edge of the roof. "What are you doing?" Harvey says. "I'm praying," says the boy. "Praying to whom?" Harvey asks. "Praying to God," says the boy, pointing to the sky. "To God?" Harvey says to himself. "Is there an even higher level? Is there a floor above?" Then Harvey asks the boy, "Do you mean there is someone above me, someone greater than I am?" "Yes," the boy replied. "Then grant me this final wish," he says to the bug. "Put me in the type of position that God would have if he were on earth." And that very day, so the fable goes, Harvey begins work in the stockroom. In today's gospel lesson, we remember the awesome power of God is manifested to 3 of Jesus' apostles on that Mount of Transfiguration. And there in the presence of Peter, James, and John, we remember the glory of God in Christ was revealed in a dazzling vision. And then that scripture about that voice from heaven speaking to all 3 of the apostles, "This is my son, my chosen one, listen to him." Listen to him, all you Harveys of the world who are lost. Listen to him. Those who exalt themselves will be humbled, and those who humble themselves will be exalted. Whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave to all. That means because we're all children of a loving God, all lovable in God's eyes, we must see one another in that same light. Respect one another in that light. Love one another in that light. And in so doing, in the experience of loving one another, we experience our best human glimpse of God, who is love. The mystery of God's love, beloved, is beyond human understanding. And in that sense, the mystery of life He has given us is beyond our human understanding. But in God's own wisdom, we catch little glimpses of both mysteries when we are faithful to His command to love one another. And even though we can't explain it, if we get our clearest answers to our questions about self-identity when we follow Jesus' example of serving others. One of the duties of a shepherd, by the way, as you know, is to prevent wayward sheep from wandering away on their own. And Jesus often used, didn't he, the imagery of a sheep and shepherd in his teachings. And one of his best-known parables, of course, is the parable of the lost sheep. And again and again and again, he describes himself to his followers, his flock, as the good shepherd. Any shepherd will tell you that a sheep doesn't separate itself from the flock and get lost as an act of defiance of the shepherd's authority. A sheep just doesn't do that. It doesn't decide, I'm going to stop following the shepherd. Rather, it just wanders along, heedless of danger. Seeing one tuft of grass over there that looks better than the tuft of grass that he had right here, and he never looks back. He just keeps going, and finally he gets lost. He might be on a mountain ledge or down in a swamp somewhere that they never wanted to be in the first place. And an experienced shepherd was asked how it was that sheep tend to stray away and get lost. And he answered, they just nibble themselves lost. And if you don't have faith enough in the gospel truth to put into practice, you're still nibbling yourself lost. You're still searching for your true self in the wrong places. And I'll never forget, somebody said to me one time, when you pray, don't bother to give God instructions, just report for duty. In the basement. For everyone who humbles himself or herself shall be exalted. And finally, there was a Sunday school superintendent and an elementary school principal who were conducting and reviewing the 8th grade teacher's work. And as they entered the classroom through the back door, they heard the teacher say to the tallest boy in the class, Otto, would you please raise the window? And when Otto had raised the window, the teacher said in a voice that all could hear, I don't know what I would do without Otto. He's the only one who can raise that window for me. Well, after they had left the classroom, the principal said to the school superintendent, I hope you noticed what a beautiful and sensitive thing that teacher did for that boy named Otto. You see, Otto is very large for his age and very awkward. He is slow to learn and desperately needs encouragement. You see, the window really didn't need raising, but Otto needed to raise the window. He needed recognition. And the teacher bless her heart, was responding to this need. A very simple act, a small act of kindness, yet very important to all of us, because before this week is over, we will have dozens of similar opportunities to be sensitive to another person's needs and the opportunities to care. Let me be a little kinder. Let me be a little blinder to the faults of those about me. Let me praise a little more. Let me be, when I am weary, just a little bit more cheery. Let me serve a little better those who I am striving for. Let me be a little braver when temptation bids me waver. Let me strive a little harder to be all that I should be. Let me be a little meeker with the brother that is weaker. Let me think more of my neighbors and less of me. And please, Lord, please, Lord, please, Lord, let me stop nibbling myself lost. Amen.